So LLMs have been a big part of tech since 2023, and I think there's two really predictable human responses to it. One is it's like a golden hammer or a silver bullet. It's like, okay, this is magic. This can solve every problem for us. And the reason why this is attractive and predictable is because it's just something you want to believe. You want that to be true. And so whether it is true or not, we want these things to be true. So we're just going to believe that. And I think that one's, really well understood. People understand that people are doing that. The other predictable human response is the other way, which is to say, um, everybody's been tricked. This is actually not really that interesting. And I see this, everybody else doesn't see this. And this is attractive because it makes us feel really smart. It makes us look like it has the appearance of being thoughtful and critical when it's not. It's more, I want to be smart and I want this to be true. Therefore, I'm going to believe that this is true because I like the idea of being in this position. So neither of those are very critical. Neither of those are very thoughtful, actually, and neither of those are interested in the truth. They're just interested in what they want to be true. Um, so how do we avoid both those things? Well, you avoid both those things by just actually using LLMs and figuring it out for yourself and figuring out where they're useful, where they're not useful. So my thoughts on this are, like when I first saw it, I thought I was, super impressed. But then, you see the hallucinations, you're like, maybe it's not perfect. Um, but as I've started using it, it's it seems like a really important tool that we haven't had before that we can use to solve problems. So I was reading this article of this guy who he was a software engineer and he was like super skeptical of it. And he had a friend who isn't a software engineer who maybe, did a bit of software development like 10, 20 years ago or something. Like he was not doing it anymore. So they're working on a project. He usually did design. The guy who didn't wasn't a software developer. But this time around, he actually was committing code and being productive. And the guy's like, "Oh, how did you? Where did you? I didn't know you learned. You got back into software development." And the guy's like, "I didn't. I'm just using ChatGPT." So it's at this point that the cynical software developer had to like say, "Okay, this I can't argue with this result. I need to look into this." So he was looking into LLMs, and he had a really really good analogy. So when and I know nothing about F1 racing, but this is the analogy that he gave. So when an F1 racer, there's this idea of mechanical empathy, which is to say that you need to understand the car you're driving, because if you don't know where the limits are. You won't be able to take a turn in the most optimal way if you don't know the limits. You need to know where to not go past the limit, but you need to go right up to the limit. Um, and so he was like, I need to develop a similar kind of mechanical empathy, but for LLMs, where I understand exactly what it can and cannot do so that I can use them effectively. So, anyways, my thoughts. So, the title of this is My Thoughts. My thoughts on this is that I personally need to use LLMs as much as possible to understand them, and I need to use them in a way that helps me practically. Like I don't want to make magic tricks that I show off in demos that do something like really interesting, but it's actually they only do it like 1 out of 20 times they get it right or something like that. Like I want to make tools that are actually helpful for myself and actually practical. Um, and I want to go in this direction really hard because I have this is just my opinion now. I have this fear that people who do know how to use LLMs effectively might be able to outpace me in sort of new tasks. Like if I'm an expert at something, I'm fine there. But if I'm not an expert, like if I'm like new to an area or whatever, it's going to take me a certain amount of time. Whereas someone armed with an LLM who knows how to use that might be able to get up to speed on something a lot quicker than me. And so I feel like I need to understand this thing and know how to use this thing to be effective in the future. Um, and so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to be making uh, different things that help me in my daily life, and maybe I'll make videos about them and try to figure out where's the practical use case for LLMs and what are the things that allow me to like accelerate my own output in my work, in my learning, in my own life. So those are my thoughts.